I found it. Okay, we are recording. Let me pull up.
Yay.
Okay. 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 Whenever you're ready, Mia, take it
I want to
away.
make sure, am I lagging at all? No?
No.
Okay, I'm good.
Well, you did there just for a second.
Yeah.
Like you were, but now you are just for a second.
No, okay, because this computer, after it's on Zoom for a while, it starts to lag. So,
Yeah,
Wait,
am I
let
good?
me switch to Wi-Fi.
ah, ah. Hello.
When it's not, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
When it's not your turn to talk, if you'll
Mute
put
yourself.
yourself on mute as well, and then just make sure you're keeping track of when you need to unmute. That way any background sound won't interrupt.
Okay.
Okay, wait. Am I like all good? I switched my Wi-Fi, so okay, great.
Good.
All right.
Let's try in a bit. Hello, everyone. My name is Nia Imani Williams, and I'm joined here with Hannah Mascaro and Millie Melinder, and we're the undergraduate research assistants for this study on neonatal nurse perspectives on auditory needs and voice use with premature infants. And we were supervised by a faculty member, Dr. Amy Smith, who really headed this research and this whole experience for us. To give some background on this topic, language delay is a significant concern for infants who are born very preterm, which is 32 weeks out of 40. And the relationship between early auditory development and language outcomes may be a significant foundation for understanding the risk of language delay in this specific population. Now, preterm birth, it causes infants to lose access to the filtered sounds of voice and language that are very much essential for normal auditory development. And so by enhancing the auditory environment with voice sounds that mimic womb-like characteristics of speech, this may be a way to protect preterm infants from language acquisition difficulty and language delays in the future.
All right, thank you so much, Nia. So going into the purpose of our study is prior to developing an intervention that addresses the early auditory needs of preterm infants, it's really essential to study the beliefs and behaviors of key stakeholders. And so in this case, it would be the NICU nurses. So nurses are the healthcare workers who have the most consistent contact caring for these preterm infants, and they play a really important role when it comes to advocating, coordinating, and implementing developmental care practices in the NICU. And so prior to this research, there is actually no known research to exist that specifically explores nursing beliefs and behaviors when it comes to voice use for the purpose of informing an intervention development.
All right, so we have our background and we have our purpose. So now it's time to get to really the bulk of the research and what that looks like for us. So we had three major research questions. Number one was, how do nurses describe the overall sound environment of the NICU? What do nurses believe about the auditory needs of premature infants? And how do nurses and others use their voices when caring for premature infants? So these questions were developed in order to figure out what best information was needed to develop an intervention. And we developed our information by using mixed methods, descriptive study using both surveys and interviews. So a survey was sent out to NICU nurses, and then they self-selected to interview with us. And this presentation is specifically over the qualitative interview data that came from our research.
Okay, so going over the results of research question number 1, which again was how do nurses describe the overall sound environment of the NICU? There are 3 kind of overarching themes that came across. And so these themes are the sound environment being noxious, qualities of the sound environment, and then looking at what impacts the sound environment. And so if you look at the words describing all 3 of these themes, they are kind of more negative language. And so looking at noxious, the NICU nurses described the sound environment as being constant, overstimulating, chaotic, and noisy. And so again, more of these more negative terms. And looking at the qualities of sound that were presented, the NICU nurses described it as abrupt, loud, electronic, and sharp. And then looking at what impacts the sound environment, these NICU nurses stated that it can be alarms, monitors, medical rounds that are happening, parents that are in the room, the unit design. So is it an open bay with lots of pods, lots of babies, or is it a private unit with just one baby? And also the stability of the baby. And so all 3 of these themes really play into each other. And so if you have a more stable baby, there's not going to be as many alarms. The sound is not going to be as loud. It's going to be pretty constant. But if you have an unstable baby, there are going to be alarms going off, monitors going off. It's going to become more electronic, loud, abrupt, very overstimulating. And so these themes really, really play into each other when it comes to describing the sound environment of the NICU.
Thank you, Hannah. And now moving on to the research question number 2, which was what do nurses believe about the auditory needs of premature infants? The majority of nurses, their opinions really centered on the overarching opinion that auditory needs were dependent upon certain things such as gestational age, diagnosis, and then the stability of the baby. And they also believed that the nurses, had a key role in really understanding the auditory needs of premature infants and also in educating parents and others on the auditory needs of premature infants. So they really took into account things such as, educating parents, educating other nurses, educating family. And then also they took a great responsibility in ensuring that the auditory environment of these premature infants was not harmful to the babies. And so they would take actions such as silencing alarms, ensuring that the environment was not too noxious, and things such as that. And then now moving on to sound frequency and duration. They believe that regarding this category, that the best environment and the best environment that would properly suit the auditory needs of premature infants really should have less sound, because again, having noxious sound is not healthy and would not contribute to a beneficial auditory environment, and thus would not really meet the auditory needs of the infants. And so one nurse was quoted as saying that you need less than you think. So less duration of sound, less frequency of sound. For example, having a high quality of sound for a long period of time was not healthy. But then again, also having a lower frequency of sound for a longer duration would not be healthy as well, and not be beneficial for the auditory needs of these premature infants. And then regarding necessary sounds, they believe that there were and there are necessary sounds for auditory development and to meet the auditory needs of the infants. For example, things such as baby talk that the nurses themselves would use when speaking with the babies. And then also the parents' voices. So hearing the parents and how beneficial it was for the babies to hear their parents speaking to them. And that also coincides with baby talk, because parents as well, use like a higher pitched voice when talking with their babies. And that's why those two circles are overlapped. And then sound quality. The nurses believe that regarding sound quality, that beneficial songs that would really meet the auditory needs of infants, they fell into four categories. One, that the sound qualities would be peaceful. So no erratic sounds. So calm, peaceful sounds. and then individualized again for premature infants. And this also ties into the dependency and how in order to meet the auditory needs of infants, the sound quality has to be individualized on the babies and their specific, like their gestational age, how premature they are, their diagnoses. Some babies have coexisting conditions along with being born premature, and then also stability. So how stable is the baby? And so ensuring that sound qualities match up to the babies and where they're at, that is beneficial in ensuring that their auditory needs are met. And then loving, which does not sound like a sound quality, but loving could also mean, like hearing their parents talk, that baby talk, having the nurse speak to them in like in a softer voice, in a maybe a higher pitched register, again associated with baby talk. And then also quiet, so quieter sounds, nothing too noxious or too jarring for the babies. And so these were some of the themes that we saw in the nurses' beliefs centering around the auditory needs of premature infants.
Right. So question number 3 was, how do nurses and others use their voices when caring for premature infants? 3 major things were found when studying this question, which one was how nurses and others use their voices when caring for premature infants, when nurses and others use their voices when caring for premature infants, and the qualities of those voices. So when looking at how nurses use their voices, we found that most of them would say the baby's name. They would use their voices by singing, by using baby talk, like we mentioned in the previous slide, and by whispering. And then going to when they use their voices, it was often during care time, before they would touch the infant. Again, it was very needs-based. So as Nia addressed in the previous slide, it is dependent upon gestational age, diagnoses, and stability. And the nurses also said that they would use their voices during diaper changes as well. And the quality of their voices were often described as calm and quiet, and higher and warmer pitch. So going back to that idea of baby talk and what is beneficial. So we see that what we found about how nurses use their voices lines a lot up with what they believe about the auditory needs of the infants are.
And now to conclude the study and also our presentation, again, we interviewed nurses because they are the key stakeholders. They have a knowledge of the environment, of the NICU environment, things that go on in the NICU, sounds that occur in the NICU, and also they have an understanding of what goes on in the NICU. They know what they do in the NICU, and they had a chance to share what they believe. And for us, this is essential to understand and to know, because by understanding the beliefs and the behaviors of these nurses, these key stakeholders, that will properly inform us of how to implement such an intervention that would target the auditory needs of infants. And so going into what they believe.
Yeah, so looking at what they believe really informs our understanding of the day-to-day implementation of an intervention. And so it's really important to know what these NICU nurses believe. Again, like we've stated in previous slides, they are the ones spending the most time with these premature infants. And so when they're on the day-to-day business, like what they believe about how a day should be run, it really will inform us in how an intervention should be planned. And so also it informs preliminary education needed in order to feasibly implement a new intervention. Again, just to restate, they're spending so much time with these babies. It's really important for us to know what they believe when it comes to the development and care of these babies in order to make a new intervention.
Right. And closely related to that is looking at what the nurses do in the behavior. This informs aligning the intervention with what is currently happening so that it fits into the culture, because something that is going to drastically go against the culture of the environment of the NICU is less likely to be beneficial. And it also informs necessary changes to current behaviors. So things that might be happening in the NICU currently that would need to change, it helps us develop an intervention that would aid that change, which is also really important. So this will conclude our presentation on neonatal nurse perspectives on auditory needs and voice use with premature infants. Thank you so much for listening and have a wonderful day.